Two words just detonated Britain's government. Israel's message to London, diplomatic war, and Keir Starmer's face reportedly went white. This isn't a press release. This isn't diplomatic language. This is Israel telling Britain, you just crossed a line we will never forgive. 1 week after the UK officially recognised Palestine as a sovereign state, Israel's government fired back with the most explosive statement in UK-Israel relations since 1948. And the fallout, it's already started. Emergency meetings, intelligence freezes, global panic. This story is moving by the hour. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, because the next 48 hours could reshape the entire Middle East. Within minutes of that statement, Downing Street went into lockdown mode. Cabinet ministers rushed into emergency briefings. Intelligence chiefs were summoned. Whitehall, normally a hive of leaks and chatter, went completely silent. And if you know British politics, that silence is the clearest sign something catastrophic is unfolding behind closed doors. Here's the terrifying part. Several joint UK-Israel intelligence operations were postponed indefinitely. That's not theatre. That's not a warning shot. That's Israel cutting Britain off from critical counter-terrorism data in real time. For a country that depends on Israeli intelligence to stop attacks on London streets, on the underground, at airports, this is a national security nightmare unfolding at speed. Conservative MPs are already screaming betrayal on every news channel. One particularly furious backbencher called it handing our enemies the keys to the kingdom. Another accused Starmer of declaring war on Britain's most trusted ally. That rhetoric sticks. And in a country still scarred by terror attacks, those words carry weight. If there's even one major security incident in the coming weeks, one attack that could have been prevented with Israeli intelligence, Labour will be politically annihilated. Labour's headquarters, total chaos. Aides are reportedly sleeping in offices, phones ringing non-stop, foreign policy staff literally arguing over how far to push back. And Starmer himself? He locked himself in his office for hours, reading intelligence briefs while aides paced outside. He even refused calls from Washington until the emergency meeting ended. That is not normal behaviour for a British Prime Minister. That shows you exactly how high the stakes are. Inside that room, Starmer's closest advisors are split down the middle. One camp is begging him to offer some reassurance to Israel, anything to prevent this from spiralling into a full-blown diplomatic Cold War. The other faction is practically screaming at him to hold firm. Their argument? If Britain backs down now, the Palestine recognition becomes an empty gesture. Britain looks weak, and every autocrat from Moscow to Beijing learns that threatening London works. Starmer is caught between national security and national credibility, and the decision he makes in the next 48 hours will define his entire premiership. But here's what nobody saw coming. The British public doesn't care about Israel's threats. New polling released this morning shows Labour actually up 2 points since recognising Palestine. Not down, up. Translation: a majority of Britons are effectively saying, yes, we knew there'd be consequences. We expected blowback, and we're fine with it. That's the gamble Starmer is betting everything on. That the British people are ready for a new chapter in Middle East policy, even if it costs Britain strategically. That voters want moral foreign policy over transactional relationships. That the old rules, where Israel's red lines were Britain's red lines, are finished. It's a massive generational bet. And if he's right, Starmer could reset Britain's entire foreign policy approach for decades. But if he's wrong, if the public turns the moment something goes wrong, if intelligence gaps lead to preventable tragedies, then Starmer won't just lose the next election. He'll go down in history as the Prime Minister who gambled Britain's security on a moral stance and lost everything. The ripples are tearing across the globe. Washington is in full panic mode. The State Department issued an unusually harsh statement within hours, calling this potentially irreversible damage to Western security networks. That language is almost never used between allies. One US diplomat was reportedly overheard saying, "This is the worst crisis in the special relationship since Suez 1956. That's not exaggeration. That's not hyperbole. If Britain and Israel actually freeze relations, it cripples intelligence sharing from MI6 to the CIA to Mossad. The entire Western security architecture depends on these networks functioning seamlessly. Republican lawmakers are already demanding congressional hearings on whether Britain can still be trusted with shared intelligence. Think about that. America's closest ally, the country it shares more secrets with than any other nation on Earth, is now being questioned in Congress. That's how serious this has become. Germany entered emergency cabinet sessions at midnight. Their foreign minister issued a statement calling Britain's move dangerously unpredictable with consequences we cannot foresee. Translation: Berlin is terrified this crisis could drag the entire European Union into the fire. Germany has spent years trying to balance relations with Israel and Arab states. Britain just blew up that careful equilibrium overnight. Spain and Ireland, both publicly flirting with following Britain's lead on Palestine recognition, have suddenly gone radio silent. No statements, no briefings, no hints about their next moves. They're watching to see if Israel destroys Britain first. If Israel makes an example of the UK, no other European nation will dare follow suit. Spain and Ireland know it. That's why they've gone dark. France, ever eager to position itself as the reasonable adult in the room, is reportedly preparing its own call for restraint and dialogue, which is French diplomatic speak for, please don't blow up what's left of our Middle East relationships, because we still have business deals we care about. But the Arab world? They're not panicking. They're celebrating, and they're moving fast. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince hasn't walked back a single investment commitment made after Britain's recognition announcement. In fact, leaked reports suggest he just hinted at billions more in funding if Britain holds firm. The United Arab Emirates and Qatar are reportedly accelerating energy and infrastructure deals worth tens of billions of pounds. This isn't just diplomatic support. This is economic warfare in reverse. Arab states are financially rewarding Britain for defying Israel. This is Starmer's calculation laid bare. Weather the short-term storm with Israel and the United States and cash in massive long-term economic rewards from the Gulf. Billions in investment mean jobs, growth, infrastructure projects. A political win Labour can carry into the next election. It's cold, it's calculating, and it just might work. Qatar is even offering to mediate between Britain and the wider Muslim world, positioning itself as a bridge. Saudi Arabia is reportedly opening discussions about defence partnerships that could partially offset the loss of Israeli intelligence cooperation. The economic stakes are now crystal clear. If Britain survives this crisis, the payoff could be transformational. A complete reorientation of British trade, energy policy, and Middle East engagement. But there's a flip side. If the gamble fails, if Gulf money doesn't materialise fast enough, if security incidents occur before new partnerships are in place, then Starmer faces the biggest political disaster of the 21st century. He'll have sacrificed Britain's most reliable intelligence partner for promises that never materialised. Here's where it gets truly dangerous. Israel isn't bluffing. Leaks from Jerusalem reveal that Netanyahu's cabinet held an emergency meeting within hours of Britain's recognition. They're preparing what one Israeli official called a menu of retaliatory options. That includes recalling ambassadors, suspending high-level military cooperation, and potentially pressuring Washington to isolate Britain through trade and defence agreements. Israeli media is already running headlines branding Starmer the Prime Minister of Hamas, language so extreme and inflammatory it's shocking even veteran Middle East commentators. One Israeli newspaper ran a front page showing Starmer's face next to Hamas leaders. Another called Britain's recognition a betrayal that will be remembered for generations. This isn't just diplomatic pressure. This is a coordinated campaign to make Starmer toxic, to make his decision politically unbearable. And there's a darker possibility that nobody's saying out loud, but everyone's thinking: covert retaliation. Israel has capabilities most nations can only dream of. Cyber operations, intelligence leaks designed to embarrass Downing Street, targeted pressure campaigns against Labour politicians. This isn't just diplomatic posturing anymore. This is full-spectrum warfare. And Britain may not be ready for what's coming. Intelligence officials across Europe are reportedly on high alert. There are whispers, unconfirmed but persistent, that Israel could leak damaging intelligence about British operations or expose security vulnerabilities to make a point. That's the nuclear option. And if Israel goes there, the relationship may be damaged beyond repair for a generation. Meanwhile, Britain's Jewish community is caught in the crossfire. Community leaders are pleading for calm as anti-Semitic incidents tick up online. Far-right agitators are using the crisis to stoke division. Far-left activists are celebrating in ways that cross into ugly territory. Police are on high alert for protests outside Parliament, synagogues, and Israeli diplomatic buildings. One wrong move by either side, one inflammatory statement, one violent incident, and this spills into domestic chaos. Jewish groups are urging Starmer to clarify that recognising Palestine doesn't mean abandoning Israel's security. Pro-Palestine activists are demanding he go further, calling for sanctions on Israeli settlements. Starmer is trapped between two communities he cannot afford to lose. Labour's electoral coalition depends on both groups. Alienate either side too much, and the party fractures. Conservative MPs smell blood in the water. They're lining up in Parliament to accuse Starmer of recklessly gambling with British lives for political points. One shadow minister called the decision moral vanity, masquerading as foreign policy. Another said Starmer has endangered every British citizen for a photo op with Palestinian activists. That messaging is cutting through. Polls show Conservative voters overwhelmingly oppose the recognition. If Labour wavers even slightly, Tories will pounce. Inside Labour, the fractures are widening. Senior MPs are warning Starmer not to budge an inch. Their argument, backing down now, doesn't just undermine this decision. It signals to every adversary that Britain folds under pressure. It tells Putin, Xi Jinping, and every autocrat watching that threatening consequences works. One Labour minister reportedly told Starmer, "If we retreat, we're not just losing on Palestine, we're losing our spine as a nation." But others are pleading for compromise. They're terrified that a total freeze with Israel could backfire catastrophically at the next election. They're running scenarios where intelligence gaps lead to attacks, where Israeli capabilities that once protected Britain are suddenly unavailable, where families of victims demand answers, and Starmer has to admit he knew the risks. Insiders describe Starmer as calm, almost defiant, not defensive or panicked, but resolved. Some in his inner circle are calling this his Churchill moment, the test of whether he stands under pressure or folds when the heat is highest. Others think he's delusional, comparing a Middle East recognition dispute to World War II leadership. But here's the brutal reality Starmer faces. He's betting Britain's national security on a moral stance. If Israel follows through with a full freeze, Britain loses access to intelligence, just as global terror threats are escalating, just as cyber warfare intensifies, just as geopolitical instability spreads from Ukraine to the Middle East to the South China Sea. The world is becoming more dangerous, not less. And Starmer is voluntarily cutting ties with one of the most capable intelligence services on the planet. This moment carries echoes of Suez 1956, the last time Britain defied its closest allies and paid a catastrophic price. Back then, Britain and France invaded Egypt to seize the Suez Canal. The United States turned on them, forced them to withdraw, humiliated them on the world stage. It marked the end of Britain as a global superpower, the moment when Britain learned it could no longer act independently of American interests. Some historians are already drawing parallels. Is this Starmer's Suez? The moment when Britain tries to assert independent foreign policy, only to discover it no longer has the power to stand alone. Or is this Britain finally breaking free from decades of subordination, to America, to Israel, to a post-World War II order that no longer serves British interests? The answer will shape Britain's place in the world for the next generation. If Starmer survives this crisis, if Gulf investment flows, if new partnerships emerge, if Britain proves it can chart its own course, then this becomes a defining moment of strategic independence. Britain as a bridge between East and West. A nation that trades transactional relationships for principled stances and comes out stronger. But if Starmer loses this gamble, if Britain gets isolated and weakened, if security suffers and voters turn, then this becomes a cautionary tale. A warning to any nation that tries to defy the established order without the power to back it up. This is bigger than Britain and Israel. This is about whether the entire Western security architecture can survive political courage. Every NATO ally is watching. Every intelligence agency, from the CIA to Mossad to MI6, is recalibrating. Because if Britain can defy Israel and survive, if Gulf money and public support carry Starmer through, it could force Washington to rethink decades of Middle East policy. For 70 years, American and European policy toward Israel has been virtually untouchable. Support Israel. Period. No matter the circumstances, no matter the cost to Palestinian rights, no matter the contradictions with stated values about democracy and human rights. Britain just shattered that consensus. And if Britain survives, other nations will follow. But if Starmer loses this gamble, the opposite happens. Israel's response becomes a template. Threaten diplomatic war, cut intelligence ties, mobilize domestic lobbies, make the political cost so high that no other nation dares challenge Israeli policy. The status quo survives, and the two-state solution dies permanently. So here's what it comes down to. Is Israel preparing to escalate from threats to action? Will they actually freeze Britain out and trigger the biggest rupture in Western alliances since World War II? Or is diplomatic war a warning shot? Harsh language meant to terrify every other European nation considering the same move? Because make no mistake, what happens in the next 48 to 72 hours will determine far more than UK-Israel relations. It will decide whether the West can tolerate dissent within its own ranks, whether economic power from the Gulf can replace traditional alliances, whether moral foreign policy can coexist with hard security realities, and it will decide whether Keir Starmer becomes the architect of a new Middle East peace framework or the Prime Minister who triggered a historic collapse. There is no middle ground here, no compromise that satisfies everyone, no diplomatic language that papers over the fundamental choice Britain just made. Either Britain stands firm, weathers the storm, and emerges with new partnerships and global credibility, or Britain backs down, loses face, and learns that independence is a luxury it can no longer afford. Either Starmer goes down in history as a leader who had the courage to break from decades of failed policy, or he becomes a cautionary tale about idealism colliding with geopolitical reality. The clock is ticking. Israel's next move could come within hours. Intelligence sharing could be suspended. Ambassadors could be recalled. Cyber operations could begin. We're potentially witnessing the most significant rupture in Western alliances in 70 years, unfolding in real time. This story is developing hour by hour. Subscribe right now so you're first to know when Israel makes its next move, because when this breaks, it's going to break fast. And drop a comment below. Should Starmer hold firm or back down? Is this Britain's boldest foreign policy move in decades, or a reckless gamble with national security? Your take matters, because this decision will echo for generations. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and don't miss what happens next, because the world is watching and history is being written in real time.